Hello and welcome to the fourth episode now in the boss fight course. In today's episode, we're going to be focusing on the health and damage system. So we're going to set up health bars for both the player and the boss. On the screen and in the top left, you can see the player's health bar. Now, when you initiate the boss fight, you will see the boss fight health bar and the name pop up at the bottom of the screen. It responds to damage, so if you apply damage, his health bar goes down. When the player takes damage, his health bar goes down as well. Very cool. In this episode, we make another interface for damage, because on the player side, every time we damage the boss, we also want to send over an extra piece of information of what type of attack it was, not just, the damage or who caused the damage. So we look at how we can use an enum to do that. We also do a lot of work with widgets. We look at two different widgets for the player health bar and the boss health bar, and we talk about the difference between binding to a variable versus setting up a function for the variable. Today's episode isn't that intense. It's not very, very complicated. You might have seen similar things before, similar systems for setting up health. If you have already seen and you already know how to set up your own health system, you might just want to skip this video, or you might just want to skip right to the end and see kind of everything we do. But this isn't super important, to be honest. You could probably skip this video in the course if you already feel comfortable with making health and damage systems. But if you're a complete beginner and you're not really sure, then this is perfect for you to watch. Yeah, so let's get right into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the health bar for the boss. Now, the boss health bar is not just going to be a health bar, but it's also going to have the name text. And we want this to only appear when the boss sees the player. And then we also want to be able to remove it from the player's screen when the boss dies. You'll enter the boss arena, you'll see the boss, the name pops up with the health bar, and then you kill the boss and that disappears. This isn't too complicated of a system, really. We need a health bar and a name, which is a widget, and then we just need to, through various functions and interfaces, just control when do we add this to the viewport, when do we take it away, and every time the boss takes a little bit of damage, we want to send an event to the widget, which is stored in a reference on the boss, and just update that. It's not too complicated. Today's video shouldn't be very complex. We're going to go to the boss folder in the content browser. We're going to right click to make a new folder and call this widgets. There we go. Open this up, right click. I'm going to search for widget. Click on widget blueprint. Use a widget. Just click on this first one here. Use a widget. Select and call this WBP underscore boss health bar. Now, of course, before we can actually add the health bar, we need a health bar. So let's make the health bar. The first thing you pretty much always want when making a widget is a canvas. Not always, because sometimes you might not want it. I think the difference really when you want a canvas and when you don't want a canvas is if the thing you're showing has a fixed position on the screen. If, for example, you're making a health bar, a boss health bar, where you always know that the widget is going to show at the bottom center of the screen, then you'll always use a canvas panel. The canvas panel just sets the fixed position of the widget. It shows you, this is the player's screen. Wherever you put, for example, the size box onto the canvas panel is the fixed position, and it's never going to move. If you don't use a canvas panel and you just use a size box, it's a lot more easier to then determine where the widget's going to appear. For example, in an inventory system, if you open your inventory, you might have a widget prompt that says, select, use, or drop, right? Just for example, if you hover over an item, you might have a widget pop up that says use or drop or cancel or something. And then that widget, you don't know where it's going to come up, because if you hover over a different item, you want it to appear on your mouse cursor. So that widget wouldn't be in the same spot every single time. So then you wouldn't use a canvas panel, you just use a size box. But here, we always want the boss's name and health bar to be at the bottom center of the screen. So we're going to use a canvas panel. Then on top of that, we're going to add a size box. Now a size box is it's a box, and you can input the size very easily. You just control how big the widget's going to be. When you place something inside a canvas panel, you have the ability to anchor it, which just means like select a relative spot on the screen that it's going to snap to. So if we anchor this to the bottom middle of the screen, that means the default, the 0, 0 position is at the bottom middle. So if we zero the positions, so just set position X and Y to 0, it's now defaulted to the bottom of the screen. It isn't in the actual middle by default here, because by default the origin of the canvas panel, of the size box, is at the top left hand corner. If you've ever worked with Pygame, you might be familiar with this concept. You don't always have the origin where you'd expect, so it can be a little bit confusing to work with. But very, very handily, we can adjust the alignment of the size box, and the alignment just means adjusting the origin point of the size box. So obviously right now, by origin, we're looking at the top left hand corner, right? This is at 0, 0 position, but the corner's in the top left. If we want to make it into the center, we can put 0.5 on the X and Y for alignment, which just shifts the origin 0.5 or halfway of the box. And then as you can see, it's nice and aligned in the center. I'm actually going to move this to 1, so we've aligned and it's pushed it inside the canvas panel. So the origin of this size box is now at the bottom middle. Very nice. And then we can just minus a little bit of Y value. So I'm just dragging up with my mouse here, and just move it up a little bit. I'm gonna put I'm thinking the Y position, I think, should be minus 50. The X position at 0 is fine. The X size, we're gonna put this to 1500. This is the value I used in the finished project, and I think it goes very well. And the size Y, we're gonna put it to 60. That looks a little bit chunky, but this is gonna contain the health bar and the name. So the health bar is gonna be like, a third of this box, and the health bar is gonna be on top of it. Now inside this size box, you can only put one main thing. So for example, I couldn't put a text and then another text into the size box. That's not how size box works. Size boxes expect that you're going to input one thing into them. They're expecting to hold one thing. Now that only means one thing in their primary layer. So in like the first thing you put into the box, that can only be of quantity 1, but you could put something into the box which is then designed to hold multiple UI elements. So for example, we can search for and use a vertical box. Now a vertical box can hold loads of different things, and it stacks them vertically. So we're going to have the health bar on top, the name on top, and then the health bar on the bottom. And by using this vertical box, we can't place another text on the size box itself, but we can place multiple text. We can place as many as we want inside the vertical box, and that's how we kind of get around the limitation of only having one thing in the size box. I'm actually going to add the one of the texts to the vertical box. We'll center align this, so align this horizontally. This just means put it right into the middle, because as we discussed before, the origin of like one of the widgets is in the top left corner. So by default, it's going to sit in the top left of the box. But if we align this horizontally and vertically, it's now in the middle. Now for the health bar, we're going to use a progress bar. This is what everyone always uses for the health bar. It's really cool and handy because it just shows a bar and it fills up from left to right or right to left. You can choose, with all these filters. We'll just leave it left to right though. And it fills from one side to the other with a different color, just representing the value from 0 to 1. So if we look at the percentage, I'll just put this to 0.5 as like the example percentage, and we can see that it fills from left to right and it goes blue on the grey background. Now I'm thinking for the boss, we should have kind of like a dark red background with a lighter red going across it, lighter red for the actual health, and then the dark red just for like the background of the health bar. So I'll change this fill color and opacity. So this is under appearance. Be very careful to get these the right way around. The appearance one is the fill color. This is what is going to show the filling, and we're going to put this to like a sort of ready color. And when you want to change the background color, you have to go to style, the style tab up here, then go to background image. Now we don't actually use an image, but we can change the tint, which is the same thing as just color. We can put this to red as well, darken it, there we go. I quite like that actually. I think it's a nice sort of fill, and we're mostly done, except there's one important feature that you have with the vertical boxes I'd like to talk about, and that's the fill option. So right now when you add these, they both kind of take their default position, but if you want to make sure that all the elements inside your vertical box or horizontal box, which just stacks things horizontally, if you want to make sure that they all snap into the most optimized position to fill everything as closely as possible, you can press the fill button. So click fill here and we'll click fill here. Now this value, this 1, is a ratio, and it describes the part of the ratio that this item has. So right now we have 2 items in the widget, in the vertical box, and they both have a value of 1. Now this is their ratio weight, so it's a 1-to-1 correlation, which means they both take up 50% of the size box of the vertical box. If you added a third one that also had 1, then you'd have 1-to-1-to-1, so each one is 1 out of 3, so it's 33%. Pretty simple, like high school maths really. It's just a simple ratio. If we change this progress bar to, I like the value 0.4 for the size of it, then that means, you know, this is 1 to 0.4, otherwise known as 10-to-4. You know, this is taking up a lot more than this is taking up, and we can just make it smaller. We could also have said this is 3, and then that takes up more room than the text box. That still looks like it's pretty chunky with the actual text, but the text block widget itself, you can see with this green box, is a lot smaller, so we could adjust the text font size to, you know, make that smaller. But like I said, I'll go to the progress bar and I'm just going to put this to 0.4 fill, because I think that size is quite nice. We should rename these because I'm going to use the variables. So I'm just going to rename the text block to boss name, and I'm going to rename the progress bar to boss health bar. Boss health bar. Now, if we really wanted to just do something super easy and simple, we could go here and we could just fill in the boss's text name automatically, but I don't really think that's a very optimal system. I think we can do a lot better. We can just, you know, pretty easily make something that's a lot more capable. And what we can do is we can make a function which will decide what this text block says, and every time we make this health bar we can just update that. And what that does is, if we wanted to make a second boss which was, you know, very similar but just had a different name, we could reuse the same boss health bar, but of course we can just, you know, put in a different name when we create the widget. We could do the same thing with a lot of different features as well. We could do it with the color, with everything really. You could change anything about this if you make it a variable and decide to change it when you make it. But just to show one thing that's actually going to be used here, we'll do the health, well, not the health bar, the name of the health bar. So the way we're going to do that is, if we go to the graph, we have access to where's the name? Did we not make? Okay, yes. So by default, all of these fill bars, all of these progress bars are variables, which means when you go into the graph, you can see them displayed under the variable tab. You can drag them into the graph and you can edit their properties, etc. Now, text blocks by default, they don't have that feature. Now you can, very easily just click this is variable checkbox, true, compile, save. Now we can see it. I forgot to do that, but now we've made that as a variable. Now we can see the boss name. So now we want to make two functions, one to update the name and one to update the actual percentage in the percentage bar. That's going to be used when we change the health of the boss. So either when they take damage or just, if they regen. That's a feature we're going to make. We're going to make a regen ability later in the series. So I'm going to click on new function and I'm going to call this update boss health. Now, this function is very, very simple because there's actually a pre-made function which will update the percentage of a percentage bar for us. So all we really need to do is take in a variable that tells us what percent we want and then just use the default setting, the default function for that update. So if we drag in the boss health bar variable, if we drag off and say set percent, click on the function one. You can do it as a variable, but the function is just what I always use. I think it just makes more sense. Select that over here, boss health bar set percent. Now if we just take an input, and I'll just call this percent amount, so it's very clear as to what this is used for. Some people will bind a variable. You might have heard of that, where you bind a variable to another piece of data and it constantly updates. You can do that, but the reason that's slow, the reason that's inefficient, and the reason why we're not doing it here is because to bind a variable, you are checking every single tick if that's updated. You're constantly checking over and over again, has this variable updated, has it updated, has it updated? But instead, by using this function call, instead of checking every single tick if it's updated, we can just only check or only tell it when we need to, and then that's very optimal and doesn't waste computer resources. So for example, every time we get damaged, we'll do our take damage function, we'll reduce our health, and then we'll call to this function input our current health divided by our max health, which will give us a percentage or just a value between 0 and 1. And then this will come in here and fill this in. We'll always put in a value between 0 and 1, but that's essentially a percentage, right? 1 out of 0 to 1 is 100%, 0.5 50%, 0.25 25%. That's how it works. Pretty simple. The next function we're going to make is our health bar, our name for our health bar, sorry. I keep saying that. So we're going to call this update boss name. Right, update the name of the boss. Cool. Compile, save. Just as a reminder, the reason we're doing this is because we can use the same health bar with multiple bosses, or you can very easily just change what you're calling the boss. It's not a fixed value, which is just, proper design. And this works exactly the same as the other one. We would just want to take an input of the name of the boss. So make an input, call it name of type name, and then drag in the boss name variable, drag off it and say set text, do the widget function, plug that in. I put this to the name. We should put to text the value, the value of this variable as a text value, just because then it fits better with this one. It doesn't have to cast or anything to a different variable type. Compile and save. Now our boss health bar is completely set up. And what we're going to do is, because of course we can't actually see this, right? We've made it, but we haven't used it yet. On our boss blueprint, so on BP_base boss, whenever we, start the character, I don't know why I'm going over chase like that's event begin play. It's not event begin play. Every time event begin play fires, or every time the game starts, we want to create a variable of this widget type of WBP_boss health bar. We want to store it, and we don't want to show it straight away because our boss might spawn in quite a while before the player has actually seen the boss, before the player has initiated the combat with the boss. So we'll create the health bar, we'll input the name, and we'll input the default health just as 1 as soon as that starts, but then we'll only show that when the boss sees the player. So do you remember in our state tree, let's go back to our state tree, so AI state tree, in this idle task we constantly check if we have an attack target, and if we do have an attack target we succeed, if we don't we succeed with false. And we're going to slightly update this so that if we do have a valid attack target, we will call a function on our interface, which will just be called, like, I don't know, start combat, or like, you know, show boss name. It's the start trigger, and then that function will then call to here, which will actually display the health bar. If that wasn't 100% clear, it will be, because we're about to do it right now. Let's go just find a little bit of space at the top, search for begin play, event begin play. I'm going to make a function. So click on new function. I'm going to call this initialize widgets. I cannot spell today. There's no real need to put this into a function. We're not going to have any inputs, any outputs. It's, you know, it's going to be the exact same as if we just wrote out all the code in this graph. It's just, I think, especially like if you're initializing widgets at the beginning of event begin play, you can sometimes end up with loads and loads of just a massive long line of like a bunch of nodes all the way down here, and it just looks messy, it just looks confusing. So if you put it into one function, it obviously runs the exact same way, you know, but at least it looks a bit better, at least in my opinion it does. So inside the initialize widgets function, we are simply going to drag off and say create widget. Now remember, this is like going to fire as soon as event begin play starts, so it's the same as just doing it in the normal event graph, but here is just a bit cleaner. Compile and save. Of course you get an error because we haven't inputted the class. We're going to obviously put in the WBP underscore boss health bar. Now we can compile and save. So as soon as the game starts, as soon as begin play fires, we're going to initialize this widget. So we're going to create the boss health bar, or at least a copy of it. We're going to store its value into a variable. We'll just call this health bar. So now we have a reference to this boss health bar. We have to store this, so we can't just, you know, keep creating new health bars, because this is just, you know, an instance of the health bar. The health bar is like a blueprint, and you can make 100 of the same type of health bar. So if every single time we try to update our health, if we just said create WPP boss health bar widget and then try to say, like, you know, update health from that, we would be trying to update the health on a different widget every single time. So we always need to store this as a reference so that we can make sure we're updating the health on the exact same health bar. Now, after we've promoted this to a variable, we just want to say update health, update boss health, and also update boss name. Now, we won't be able to see these right from the start because, you know, we're not showing them on the screen. We haven't said add to viewport yet, so the player can't see them. But if we set the values now, eventually when we do show it to the player, then it will already be all ready to go. The percentage amount we want to put into the boss health bar, obviously it's value between 0 and 1, and we can get that by getting our health, our max health. Where is it? Did I create a variable for max health? Get max health. No, I don't think I did. I created health, but I never created max health. Okay, so click on health, press Ctrl D to duplicate it, and just call it max health. Nice. So now we've got another float variable for that. I think for now, just for simplicity, I'm going to put the max health to 100. Obviously, you don't have to have your max health at 100, but, you know, when you're making a new system, just to make sure like the variables are working and everything, you just have a nice consistent value. And we'll divide the health by the max health, plug that in. This will always return a value between 0 and 1 for the percent amount. And for the name, I'm going to call him Kang the Conqueror, because I don't know, I just like that name. I think it's a cool name from Marvel, so I just think it's cool. He doesn't at all give Kang vibes. Like, if you look at the boss, you would not look at him and think that is a Kang. You'd never think that's a Kang name. But you know, let's just call him Kang. That's a cool name. That's a boss name. All right, now that's done. We will go back to our event graph, and we'll just drag this down a little bit. So now, as soon as the game starts, we have a reference to our boss health bar. We haven't showed it yet, but we know we've updated the health and the name on this health bar. So all we need to do now is control when do we show it, when do we take it off the screen, and you know, when do we update it. Now, the first thing I think the most logical thing to do is to control when you show it, because then we can see it before we try and update it, you know, reducing or adding health. And we're not just going to simply make a function here. I want to make this through an interface, because like I said, on here in this stt_hasValidAttackTarget task for our state tree, we are going to call to that interface function after we have checked if we have a valid attack target, because if we have a valid attack target, it means we've seen the player, and when we see the player for the first time, we want to add this health bar. Of course, we'll only add it if we haven't already added it, otherwise there's no point doing it. So yeah, we're going to go to our boss interface. So in our content drawer, go to boss, go to interfaces, int_boss. I'm going to add a new function, and call this add health bar to viewport. There we go. I should correct the spelling. I always spell poorly when I'm recording because I've got to like type around my microphone. It's on like a little stand, so it's right in front of my keyboard. Yeah, anyways, all right. Add health bar to viewport. We'll make another function for remove health bar from viewport. So remove health bar from viewport. And this is because if we kill the boss, we obviously want to remove the boss's health bar. We don't just want it staying there permanently. These don't need any inputs or outputs. We don't need to pass anything over. We just need a simple trigger of the event. Remember, in interface, when you make functions, you're declaring the function, and then in a specific character, you have to go and define what the function does. So all we need to do, we've made the functions so we can call them from this task. So from our boss reference, we go here, just drag off, and on the isValid pin, or rather after the isValid pin, we're going to add this add health bar to viewport function. So let's just make a little bit of space, plug that in. Cool. Add a reroute node just so it looks a bit cleaner. And on the is not valid, we don't need to remove the health bar. Actually, we do, yes. I think this is probably the best way to do it, because if our boss dies, then I guess they will no longer have a valid attack target, because the reference to our boss will be destroyed. So the attack target will obviously be invalid. So yes, that's what we're gonna do. So all right, off the boss, we're gonna say remove health bar from viewport. I just checked my notes, because obviously I've already done this project, and yeah, that's what we did before. That's what I did the first time when I made the project, because you know I've already done the project. Once the project files are all completed, all the videos have already been filmed. It's all on my Patreon. So you know, if you're watching this as soon as it comes out, then you'll only be up to episode 4. You'll still have to wait a couple weeks before the final video comes out. But if you get it on my Patreon, you can get all the videos instantly with the project files, and you know, it just supports the channel, and you know, means I can keep making more series. Now, if we go back to our base boss, we're going to define these functions. So click on the interfaces. These interfaces have yellow/golden icons instead of gray ones, because these gray ones are just output functions, right? All they do is return something, but these yellow ones, they actually do something. Like they have they have like an actual purpose rather than just returning a variable. That's why they're different colored, and it automatically creates these events for us. That's why we didn't need to make a custom event before, because we already have access to these events just by clicking on it, double clicking on the golden icons. And on this first one, so event, oh, I've put them the wrong way around. Let's have the add one first. Now on the first one, when we want to add the health bar to the viewport, we want to get our health bar. So drag that in. I'm gonna convert this to a validated get to make sure it's valid. We know that it always will be, because we know that we've added it on begin play. But if you, for some reason, you're changing the system yourself, or you want to make a change and you happen to just decide to remove that for whatever reason, then we'll throw that up as an error. So we'll have a print string, and I'm just gonna say health bar not valid, and I'm gonna add a reroute node. I like doing this just for debugging purposes. It's rare that this would happen, but if you do it every single time that you think there could be a slight edge case, then even if there's just like a 0.1% chance it's gonna fire, eventually you're gonna have an error and this is gonna fire. In my experience in the Unreal Engine, 90% of debugging like sessions end in like very, very simple fixes. If you ever got like a problem and it's taking like 3 hours to solve, you've got no idea what the problem is, it looks like everything's perfect but it's just not working for some reason, it's probably, not always, but probably you've just done something really stupid and really simple and you kind of overlook it. And that's why I think it's important to always have these reroute nodes, the break nodes and the print strings on stuff that you'd think, well, it's not going to fire, we don't need it, but just in case, because if this does fire, there's an error. So if you ever have an error like this, then you can catch it very quickly. So yeah, that's why I think it's important to add these print strings. But of course, now if it is valid, we're going to add this to viewport. So just search for add to viewport, this function down at the bottom. Cool. And we do actually need to do a little bit more afterwards in a later video. So later in the course, we're going to make like a weak state health bar, which is like a gauge which is going to fill up to represent how much damage the boss has recently taken and if we can do a special attack or not. For now we don't have that. Later in the course we'll come back and add it. For now it's not there. On the bottom one, we can do the same thing, duplicate this code, except instead of saying add to viewport, we're going to say remove from viewport. Not remove from viewport, remove from parent, sorry. It's the same thing. You are essentially removing it from the viewport. It's just called remove from parent. Now if we compile and save, go to the boss. If we come over here, hit begin play. Health bar not valid. Okay, so this is firing. And that is exactly why having these print strings and debugs is very important, because I've obviously made a very, very silly mistake and we've caught it. I'm going to pause this, come back and tell you exactly what went wrong. Okay, so after some consideration, I've decided that there isn't really an error here. This is firing, but it kind of should fire, because we're trying to remove the health bar every time we don't see the player. But if we've never seen the player, then we've never added the health bar, so it's never going to be valid. So what I'm actually instead gonna do, I'm just gonna get rid of this. I'm just gonna delete this. See, what I think is happening is when we start the game, event begin play fires, we initialize the widgets, and this variable is going to be invalid when this state tree fires. I think what's happening is this state tree is firing before the boss has been initialized. Event begin play is not the first thing that fires. I actually made a whole video on the startup process in the Unreal Engine. The video was a complete flop, I won't lie, but the information is actually very good. I did a lot of research on it. An event begin play is, actually quite low down on the chain of what happens. In the very first thing that happens is like the whole world is generated, obviously. But without getting too much into detail, I think this task is firing before we've initialized the widget. It's not just firing this function. So event begin play happens, then it calls to the function, then it creates this, then it sets it as a variable. I think by the time we've tried to set this as a variable, this task has already fired, which means the very first time that we are seeing this function fire, it's going to say false. Because the task isn't going to be valid yet. Sorry, the health bar isn't yet going to be valid. But if we take a look at what happens if we just have a print string. So if I just print this, and we'll just leave it as hello, we'll change the color to red, or like a ready orange, compile. If we play the game, we only see it once. Now it's going very quickly, but it's shooting there once and it's going down. The reason it's only firing once is because after the task is first fired, we've now had time to create that health bar variable and store it, so then when we get to that again, it is valid. So yeah, I don't actually think it's a problem here. I think that's just kind of how it's naturally going to work. I'm gonna leave this in. If you're seeing this in the video, I could have just edited it out, but I think I'm going to leave this in just because I like the debug and the explanation. Sometimes, everyone's going to have to debug things. Like when I made this the first time, I had like loads of errors, but then I had to, fix them, find out what the problem is. So I think it's good you can see like what I've just decided, how I've gone about trying to solve this problem, how I've tried to figure it out. I think that's quite important for a new Unreal Engine user. So I'll leave this in, and we'll carry on. Now if we compile and save, when we play the game, when we run into the boss's vision, he can now see us. Cool. When we run away, he still knows the attack target's there, so he's not going to get rid of his health bar. Now we can't damage the boss yet. We haven't set anything up. But yeah, we've initialized the health bar to spawn for the boss. On the base boss, we actually need to set the health, because when we play, if you remember, we had like a brighter red color as the fill content for the health bar. But right now the health is set to 0 at default. So if we put this to 50, you'll see the health bar will be 50% full. And if we set it to 100, it will be completely filled. And the idea is, every single time we damage the boss, we just sort of regenerate it, we update the health, we update the percentage on the percentage bar, and it's going to show us the next value. So on the base boss, I am not just going to say event damage. You see, if I say event damage, event any damage, this would work, and we could do a very simple setup of saying, oh, health subtracted by damage equals new health, blah, 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 blah. But in our game, the player has 3 types of attacks. They have basic attacks, heavy attacks, and fatal attacks. Now, we obviously haven't set any of these up, but by the end of the course, we will have done, and we're going to explore all these concepts. So we want to plan for the future, right? I know that when I pass over the event, we have taken damage. I also want to know what type of attack it was, because for our boss, if they have their attack gauge as full, again, we haven't created it yet, but we will do later. when they have their like attack gauges being full, when they're ready to be hit by a special attack, if we hit them with a heavy attack, then it will like stun them and they'll be ready to be fatal attacked. But if we do a normal attack, a basic attack, nothing different will happen than a bit of normal damage. So we need to send over that extra information of what has been damaged. And there's a really, really cool way we can do that with an interface. We can make our own interface with our own damage function, and in an interface, because you can decide all the variables and outputs, all the input and output variables of a function, we can decide what data gets passed over, what data we need when we trigger an event damage. So I'm going to make a new interface. I'm going to call this int_damage for damage interface. int_damage. Open this up, and I'm just gonna call this take damage. I'm gonna call it take damage, not apply damage, because this is going to be the function that is on the boss, which takes away the health from the boss. The player will call to this take damage function, and they will, pass over the damage they've done, what type of attack it was, and that will, take off the health of the boss. Now, one of our inputs is going to be what type of attack it was, and I want you to think, we did a similar thing earlier. We've already used this sort of method. I want you to think, just take 3 seconds to think, how can we make a variable that tells us what type of damage it was? Because that's not an Epic Games defined variable type, just heavy attack, basic attack. That Epic Games doesn't know that, Unreal Engine doesn't know that. So how can we do that? Just think about it. Well, the answer is we can use an enumeration. Remember, we made an enum before. In here we made an enum for the boss senses. That's our self-defined types, and it's essentially just like strings, but we can just use them ourselves to switch and do various different cases, right? We can make our own enumeration. So enumeration called e_damage type. I'm going to open this up. We'll add 3 for now. We'll have basic, we'll have heavy, and we'll have fatal. Now, fatal, it doesn't actually mean kill the enemy. That's just in testing. It's what I called the attacks where the boss is stunned and you do like a special attack to damage them. If you've seen the series introduction, I showcase all of these features. So if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say like fatal attack, bosses being stunned, go and rewatch the introduction to this course, because in that episode I explain all the different features, what we're going to do over the entire course. So yeah, hopefully it should make sense if you've seen that. We'll just save everything. Now back into this int_damage, we're going to input the damage. So it's going to be a float, which tells us how much damage we've taken. We're going to input the damage type. So damage type. This is going to be the enumeration that we just created. So e_damage type. We can close that now. And we're also going to send over damager. So whoever did the damage, this is going to be an actor. So, if the boss is damaged by something, they optionally can see who damaged them. We're probably not going to use that. In fact, we're not going to use that, to be honest. But I think if you're making a damage function, it's just very useful to send that data across. In your own system, if you change things, you might find that very helpful to know who damaged who when damage has been sent across. Now, in our base boss, we can go to our class settings, go to implemented interfaces, search for int_damage, click on the take damage function, and I'll drag this over here. We can say get our health, so get our current health and set it to health subtracted by the damage. So we're going to take whatever health we have and we're going to subtract the damage away from it, and we're going to set that to our new health. Now, this is incomplete because what if our health goes below 0? If our health goes below 0, we're dead. So we need to do a check. We need to say less than or equal to 0 and do a branch. So if this branch fires true, it means whatever damage we've just taken has lowered our health below 0, and we're going to, be dead. Now, when we handle the death state, that's actually going to be next episode's job. I don't want to do everything in today's video because I want to try and keep this about an hour long. I want to hopefully have an hour long for each episode. So for now, we're just going to print dead. But in the next episode, we're going to look at how can we set up a specific death state for our boss, which will be really cool. But on the false, we don't actually need to do anything because, we're not dead. That's all we need to know. But after our health, we need to update our health bar. So get our health bar and just search for update boss health. Plug this in, and add in the health. We're doing this before the branch because even if we die, we still want to update the health bar. If we have a minus value, it's just going to show 0. The health bar is not going to have like a weird crazy behavior. No. If our health happens to go to -5, the health bar is just going to be empty. So that's fine, right? In the split second between the boss dying, well, not the split second because we'll have the boss death animation, which we'll do in the next episode. But yeah, we'll want to see that the boss's health bar has gone down to 0. So that's really cool. That's for now all we need to do. Of course, later what we'll do with this damage type is we can say switch, and if it's a heavier type, we can check if we're gonna do we're gonna stun, whatever. Right, for now that's very good. And now all we really need is the player's attacks to damage the boss. Now I don't like saying this because I feel like it's just a bit classic, all the real information is just later. But we are just going to quickly set up some test purposes, because again, the actual player attack video is going to come later in the series. In the series introduction, I gave an outline of all the different episodes and what we're going to cover in every single episode, like what the focus of each episode is going to be and what number that episode is. I think it's like the 7th episode or something. We're going to actually implement the attacks. For now, we just want a really simple setup where we just simply do a quick damage. So I'm just going to say event, keyboard event C. So just search for keyboard event C. This is just a really quick setup. Every time C is pressed, we're going to do a sphere trace. Oh, a sphere trace by channel. Sphere trace by channel. The start and end point is going to be our actor's location. So search for get actor location to find our location in the world. Plug those pins in. Radius we'll set to 500. Just to make sure we hit everything. Trace channel. Let's check what the boss's collision was. If I search for collision, so this is blocking the camera trace. It's ignoring visibility. So if we did on the visibility trace, nothing would happen. So we need to put this to camera. We did that on the other way around for the player, as well, if you remember. Just because, otherwise we're just ignoring the visibility, right? We're just not going to hit them. We don't need to fill in this pin because we're already ignoring it ourselves. If we hit something, we can check that with a branch. This return boolean value just means have we hit something or have we not. So if we have hit something, we're going to break our hit result. Off the hit actor, we can just call take damage. We'll leave it as basic type. Damager we'll put to self. and the damage, we can just say 25. I know I sped through that a little bit, but this is just really a quick test setup. You know, this, I really don't want to focus on the damage system in today's episode. That's for a later episode. I just wanted to get a quick setup done. I will explain though, in a lot of setups you will see something like, oh, hit actor will do actor has tag, or you'll have to do a check to make sure the actor is the boss or whatever. We don't need to do that, because the nature of an interface is that each function can have its own definition depending on who's defining it. Now, that's kind of complicated, but what it means is if we have this int_damage interface on the boss, it will only do this function because it's the boss who's said to do this. This part that I've highlighted, this is only going to happen on the boss. This definition of the function only applies to when the boss is taking damage. If I, redid the function, if I added this interface to the player, I could, call the function again off the interface event take damage, and if it's called on the player, I could do literally anything. I could say play animation, and I could make the character start breakdancing, and it would have no effect on what the boss does. It's completely separate, and that's really helpful, because if the actor doesn't implement the interface, nothing happens. There's no error. Like, this isn't an error case. That this is like, this isn't, oh, we're just ignoring it, we're ignoring something important. No, it's like a good functionality. We know nothing is going to happen because it just doesn't have the function. It's like if you called the function, it's like if you just said custom event, take damage, and then there was just no execution. Nothing's going to happen. It's kind of like that. So that's why we don't have to check if what we've damaged is the boss or anything in that matter, because if it doesn't implement this take damage interface, it's just not going to take damage. Nothing's going to happen. It's not going to be an error. It's just, it's going to be all fine. Now when we play, if we go near the boss, we press C on the keyboard. That went a little bit quickly. Let me change the damage to 5, compile, save that. I'll set the, for now I'll put this to for duration. We're gonna play now. Now we can see this green sphere is the radius around us. Go to the boss. Okay, I think I know what's happening. It doesn't look like he's taking damage, but when he dies, he takes damage, and that is probably because, yes, okay, so the percentage amount we're inputting is simply his health. Now, this expects a value between 0 and 1, and that's the percentage. It's not between 0 and 100, it's between 0 and 1, and the health is between 0 and 100. So if our health is 100, then we get 100 in the percent, which is cut down to 1, and it looks like 100%. Then even if we're at 5%, this value inputted is going to be 5, which is still greater than 1, which is the highest value. So it's trimmed down to 1, and it still shows 100%. We need to adjust this. So instead of just inputting the health, we input the health divided by the max health, which will essentially normalize the value to a range between 1 and 0. And now everything is going to work nice and fine. There we go. As you can see now, the boss's health is going down. That's really cool. The only thing we have left to do now is quickly add some health for the player. So we'll go back to BP_third person character. We will add a variable called health. We will make this a float. We will duplicate this and call this max health. I'm going to go a little bit more quickly now when I make this the second time, because this health on the player is pretty much the exact same thing as it is for the boss. It's just on the player this time. So I don't think I need to explain everything in as much detail, because it's the second time we're doing it, and if you think something's confusing, you can just look at the first time we did it and it's the exact same. So make two variables, health and max health, of type float. They're both going to be of value 100. I'm going to go back to our boss, go to our widgets. I'm going to make another widget. widget blueprint, user widget, and I'm going to call this WBP underscore player health. Player health. Open this up. I'm going to do a canvas because, like we said before, I always want this to be in the same place on the screen. Then I'm going to add a size box. We'll anchor it. We'll leave it anchored to the top corner. I'm going to put the X position as 110. Not 11. 110. Why is it going to 11? I don't know why it was going to 11 there. The Y position to 60. The X size is going to be 400, and the Y size is going to be 15. Compile and save. We're going to add a progress bar. So add a progress bar to the size box. The fill color I'm going to put to green, and the tint I'm going to put to red. So that means the fill color is going to fill up as green and the background is red. As you can see, if I put a default of 0.5, from left to right, we're going from green to red. Now, instead of just binding the variable, we're going to make a function which will update our health for us. Not a variable, sorry, a function called update health. Now, this is going to get our progress bar, set its percent using the function, and it's going to take whatever we input into it, which is obviously going to be defined on the player using it. So that's going to be a float. This is going to be called percent. Of course, that's taking a value between 0 and 1 because the progress bar is expecting a value between 0 and 1. This is max 1, minimum 0. So it takes in a percent, but that percent is normalized to the range of 0 to 1. So if you had 100 health out of 100, that's 1, 50 out of 100, that's 0.5, etc, etc. On BP underscore third person character, on event begin play, so if we search event begin play, we're going to say create widget. We're going to make that widget we just created. So WBP underscore player health. So when we make the widget here, we haven't really made the widget in the world. We've made an object, an item that could be instanced, but hasn't yet, been made a variable. So now we just made a variable, pointed it to a variable, call it health bar. Ooh, there we go. Health bar, and we can say update health, and we will put in the percentage of health divided by max health, because that's always going to return a value between 0 and 1. There we go. And then every time we take damage, so we need to add that damage interface we made, so int underscore damage. And then every time we take damage, we'll move this over here just so we can see everything. We want to set our current health to our health subtracted by whatever damage we've just taken. Then we want to update that on our health bar. So get our health bar, search for update health, put that down here. Very nice. We're going to do health divided by our max health. That is what I forgot to do last time. And our health divided by our max health will be the new percentage. And we're just going to do a branch to check if our health is less than or equal to 0. So get our health less or equal to 0. Plug that into the branch. If that's true, for now, we'll just print death. We're not going to set up the death in this video. Compile and save the boss. I think when we applied damage, we did it with the applied damage, didn't we? So instead, we're going to replace these applied damages to take damage. Ooh, actually. Okay, so this is where I'm going to leave it up to you, because in my system, for the player, because the player is quite a simple setup just to showcase the boss, all the player does is just so it can show off the boss's capabilities. The main focus of this course is on the boss, not the player. If you want to see like how to set up a proper Souls-like player character with a stat system and all that, let me know in the comments, because I'd quite like to do a course on that, a video series on that. So if you want to see that, let me know, and I'm happy to do one. But yeah, that's not what this is focusing on. So we don't really need to move this over to the take damage interface, because we don't need to know the extra stuff. We can leave this as just the normal event any damage. Oh. But of course in your game, because your game will be much more fleshed out, I'd imagine, you might want to move this over to the interface, and if you did, it's very, very simple. All you'd need to do is just drag off this and say take damage like we did before, put in the values, and because the player would implement that interface, then it would work. So yeah, you don't have to switch this back to event any damage, but I'm gonna, just because it doesn't really make a difference. Go here, the boss is take. Oh, where's the player health bar? Yes, we never added it to the viewport. I'll move this to the side, add to viewport. Very nice. Now we should see. Now we can see the health bar. Why is that? Why is that? Why is that showing 100, 100? Do I need to move it after? I think I should move this after we've updated. There we go. Okay. Compile. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know why that's saying 0 health. I feel like that should be saying 100% health. I'm going to pause this and I'll come back when I know why that's not working. Okay, so it was a very quick find. I never plugged in this percent. That's literally it. It was this percent in the function. So on our widget, on our WP_player health, in the graph, on our progress bar function for update health, I just never plugged in this percent. It was left like that. So compile, save. There we go. Now if we take damage from the boss, we're losing our health, and we can now damage the boss. Very, very nice. I think today's episode was a little bit simpler, because we didn't actually really work with state trees. We were more just focused on setting up the health for the boss, which I've always found setting up health bars, unless you're going for a fully fleshed out, stat system, it's more just like repetitive and the same thing every single time, to be honest. I've done the same thing like probably 50 times by now. So yeah, not too complicated. But like I said, if you want to see another course where I fully focus on the player and we look at how to set up, a proper Souls-like character, like in Lies of P, where you've got a stat system, and maybe you can like use different types of weapons. If you want to see a fully fledged out system, let me know, because I would really like to do something like that in a different course. But yeah, that's everything for today's video. As you know, the entire course is already completed, along with all the episodes for this series. All 16 of them have been recorded, and they're already on my Patreon. So if you go there, you can see all the episodes and get the completed project files for that. And it just really helps support the channel and allows me to do more courses on different things. But other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.